time with nominal data. You guys deal with nominal data every time you do course evaluations. Every single time you do course, you guys asked me about that last class, didn't you? Yeah, right? So course evaluations are a textbook case of this, where you've got scales of 1 to 7, but nobody tells you what a 3 is, or a 4 is, or a 5 is. The only thing I would ever do with nominal data is slap it into a Pareto chart or a histogram, I guess a Pareto chart, and just look at the graph and see if any underlying shape occurs. So if there's a bell curve, if, and there might not be one, if there's some kind of a bell curve or a unimodal distribution, I could then compare the centers of those unimodal distributions and say, okay, the mode of this one is to the right of the mode of this one, therefore, modally, more of you picked this one than this one. I'm not even saying that that will happen. I'd be wicked impressed if Salem came back and said, you know what, we can't tell anything from this. I would be wicked impressed if they actually looked at the data properly and said, we can't tell. We know nobody cares about worm composting, but we can't tell between public safety and whatever number 8 was. So I'd have to look at the data. Basically, I would treat it like qualitative data. Because it really is, you guys were correct in saying discrete. You said will, right? Discrete, because it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But if I change that to label it A through H, A through J, sorry. If I label it A through J, A being most important, J being least important, is there any difference? No, but you can't average those, can you? You can't average a letter. What's the average of A through J? E.5. No, you can't do that. But there's no difference in the interpretation, is there? So I would treat it like qualitative data.
You'd still have people rank it 1 through 10, but you would look at the results.
Yes.
Okay.
It's basically, and you can also do the same like shades of colors. Here's white to black, varying shades of gray. Put white as your least important, black as your most important. It'd be harder that way, obviously. But that drives home the point that you shouldn't average this. But I fear that's what's going to happen. I fear that's urban the addition is what's going to happen. That's why I want to see what they do with it. And this is why you guys did ask about student evals, right, last class, or was it the other 243 class? Somebody asked me, are you the one that's against student evals? And I was like, I'm not against them. I'm against how they're used. I love student evals. I love hearing what you guys have to say, and thank you guys, all of you that have done them for me in the past. And I tell all my students all the time, tell me exactly what you're thinking. Let me know how this class could be better, how it could be more accessible, more reachable for you guys. But the problem I had is they do just that kind of averaging on the student evals. We're going to attack this in this class because the question is, how do you then deal with it? And we've got a great answer waiting for you guys, when we get there. But the trick is, if you can change the data to letters and get the same data, then you shouldn't treat it like numbers. But it's very easy. Think about your student evals. 1, strongly disagree. 7, strongly agree. 4, neutral, I guess, right? Neutral. So what's a 3? Like just south of neutral? Like what is that numerically? It's not a number. That's the problem. It's not a number. It's a slightly disagree. It doesn't have a numerical value, and it doesn't mean the same thing from one person to the next. That's the problem, right? If I ask you how tall you are, chances are if you measure yourself 3 or 4 different times, you're going to get basically the same exact number. But if you walk by somebody in the street and say, what's that jacket they were wearing, or what do you think about that person? You're going to get very ridiculous very various qualitative responses. And you can't just assign a number. Give them a 2 for a number. Give them 2 if they think they're attractive, 1 if they think they're heinous, and 3 if they like their shoes. I mean, that doesn't mean you can average those things. It just means that you conveniently put numbers on them. So you gotta be careful with that. That's why I was picking on Kurt's brain. I'm not gonna pick on Kurt, because he's just the messenger delivering the data. And the data is useful, but I would start there, Keely. Sorry, that's a 5-minute answer to a question.
That's okay.
I didn't want 4.5 minutes extra than you wanted. But that's what I would do with it, honestly. That's where I would take it. It's easy to take an average of numbers. It's also important to know when you shouldn't. Please, Rosie.
Would it be better if each number was defined as like what its meaning was?
Absolutely. But the problem with that is you have to get somebody to agree on that.
Right.
That comes up. I just recently got shot down. I'd say within 2 years ago. We have these service components to our job, service to the college, service to the community. And one of the big discussions recently has been how much is enough? Like when can you stop doing service and sleep and stop drinking coffee? So I proposed a GPA system for service. For certain things you do, you get a certain number of points and you accumulate those points. And it sounds great on paper, just like a GPA like you guys. As long as you stay above 2.0, everybody's happy, you get promoted, right? The problem is nobody agrees on the numbers. Should student affairs be a 1 or a 2? Should curriculum be a 6 because it lasts for 3 years and you meet once a week? Nobody agrees on the definitions. And this goes back to 243, right? This goes back to 243. How are you defining your variables? That gets tricky. That gets tricky. You heard, right? There's way more autism now than there was 10 years ago. Way more cases of autism. You've heard this, right? It was in the news about 6 to 9 months ago. Way more autism. Why?
They extended the spectrum just.
Yes, Cassie, they extended the definition. They included more conditions under autism than they used to.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Asperger's is now considered an autistic condition, which means it went from 1 in 150 to 1 in 100. So, yeah, you read the news, you're like, oh my God, there's more autistic kids. I don't know. It's how they define autism. That becomes a challenge of definitions. There's not much math in this class, right? But there's all kinds of thinking. I mean, that's the thing. What should you do with those values you just got? What should you do with them? Should you trust the values you're reading? Yeah?
So what do you do with qualitative data that you're qualitative data? I mean, you said make a bell curve.
That's all. If they're make a curve and see what it looks like. That's all you can do, really. And
How
look at the mode.
do you infer from that what?
If you make, say you make 2 distributions, okay? So suppose you have the 1 through 1 to 10. Let's just say it's 1 to 10, okay? And you've got one of the responses looks something like this, and one of the responses looks something like that. Then you can include on average, and when I say average, quotes in the air, I'm talking about mode now. On average, green is ranked higher than orange. That's a clear-cut case when you actually get that. The problem, Chris, is you very often get distributions that might look like this, right? Or this, or we're out of colors, or this, right? And that's what I say. That's why I would be wicked impressed if Salem came back and go, oh, let's try something different. Because anytime you ask somebody to self-report or self-select data versus measuring data, it's immediately suspect.
So how would you do it? Right.
With that,
How would you do it?
this is the only way. I haven't thought about this. I just experienced this yesterday for the first time. So other than this, I haven't spent much time thinking about it. The question was, how would I process it? This is how I would process it. I'd draw graphs and see if it told me anything. If it didn't, or if a small subset of those responses told me something, I'd go back to those, look at the other ones, and ask myself, can I even fund those? Then it becomes a non-statistical question. Can I even fund worm bin composting? Can I even fund public safety to the extent that it will be meaningful to the students? No good answer there. Just more questions to be raised. Please, Kim.
So say they did come back and they're like, we don't know, it doesn't make any sense. Could they, if they were just looking for one thing that was the most important, could they just look and see what had the number 1 next to it the most?
They could, but my only concern is the suspectness of most.
Right.
If you're adding a bunch of numbers together. I mean, how do we know we didn't have ballot stuffing? A bunch of kids in a class said, everybody put 10 for campus safety because my car got broken into last week. I mean, then you have that and that's the problem with self-reporting versus measured too. There's no control given in this classroom. I know you guys didn't do that. But that, you always question the data unless you know how it was collected exactly. But there's nothing wrong with that.
It's
Assuming
really
that you can
simple,
trust.
like,
It is
one
very
thing,
simple. The
like-
problem with simple is sometimes it's misleading
Right.
or meaningless.
Right.
Good questions though. These are fantastic questions. This is kind of what I like a stat course about. I can sit here and give you formulas all day long and make you plug numbers into them. But if you're plugging numbers that are meaningless in and getting numbers back, they're meaningless too. They don't tell you anything. So, that's good. I'm glad we started with that. How y'all doing? How's parking? Yeah, a little chilly. Anybody slip in their car a little bit on the way in here? People are still watering their lawns even though it's 28 degrees outside. I still put you tucked in my bike on the way up 12th Street. Sit down, get the torque on the back. Little tricky. Little tricky. They do. I'll put them on once it gets icier. But right now, I'm going to turn the sprinklers off. Anyway, let's go back to yesterday. Real quick revisit of yesterday because I want to chit-chat about that experiment we ran in class. So, I'm going to let cards out. Actually, let me restart this because I want to try to get these sequenced.